Like, honestly, God, yoo-hoo. Like, I really want a boyfriend. I really, like, at the time, I remember my prayer. I was like, Lord, I don't know if you want me to get married, but I do know whoever you have for me, I want them to love you more than they would ever love me. And what struck me about Hunter from the beginning was, like, from the very get-go, our conversations were so encompassed around God. And not just, like, what you know about him, but how you know him. I just, with him, I was like, man, this guy knows God. And I want to be with someone like that because, again, like, I want to be partnered with somebody like that. I sent him a text like, thank you so much for coffee, all the stuff. I put some smiley faces. And then he responds, do you want to say what yours was? But then he was like, let's stay in touch.
Oh, okay.
No, Carlton, no, not okay. Not okay.
Like, I didn't ask for a number or anything, but like...
No, and I was butthurt by that.
Oh, yeah.
I like so wanted him to ask
this, like,
for my
cute
number.
guy didn't
And he
do it.
didn't. He just left. I was like, what? Oh, man, you got friend zoned hard.
Dang.
I was like, well, shoot. I guess Hunter and I are going to be great friends. I will go to my grave saying the best possible first date you could go on is a coffee date. Or a walking date if they're walkers and like to get steps in like me. Because I'm
Coffee
always like,
and a walk.
Coffee and a walk. Oh, let's go. Does he have the potential to be that?
I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to be part of playing games.
Are y'all waiting until marriage to have sex? Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to take a second and thank you for watching the Single Man Podcast. What started as a vision in October 2023 has grown into something more than I ever imagined. If you haven't seen episode 1 yet, I'm only creating 52 episodes, and my goal is to reach as many single men as possible through these real stories. YouTube tells me that only 10% of those who watch the podcast are subscribed. It would tremendously help the podcast reach more men if you would scan the QR code on the screen right now or click the only link in this episode's description and subscribe on YouTube. Through the link, you can also join our email list, follow us on social media, or even donate so we can keep making an impact in single men's lives. My commitment to you is to use 100% of anything donated to continue improving the quality of the podcast. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now, let's roll the episode.
Challenge yourself constantly. You have to be a little bit patient.
The whole idea is you have to become content in singleness.
I'd be lying if I said I haven't fired off some Instagram DMs.
The word dating is not mentioned in the Bible.
I dedicated my life at Tomorrow World to Jesus.
Welcome to the Single Man Podcast, where we delve into candid conversations with Christian men about their journey to faith, advice for their younger selves, and navigating dating. With a heart to reach men from all walks of life, dive into real stories of redemption, growth, and the hope found in following Jesus. I'm your host, Carlton French, a 29-year-old single Christian, and I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode. Let's jump into it. Welcome back to the Single Man Podcast. I am so excited for this conversation today. We have the wonderful Annie Mayfield and Hunter Morlock here today on the podcast. Annie, Hunter, how are you both doing?
Doing great.
Fantastic. How are you, Carlton?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming over today. I am excited to have both of y'all on as the first couple who is currently dating to have ever been on the Single Man Podcast. And just love both of y'all's relationship and just joy that you both have just from knowing each of you the last, I guess, year or so. I've known Hunter a little bit longer than you, Annie. We met in January of this year.
Yeah, we did.
And just seeing kind of how y'all started dating in the last 10 months and how God's been working in your relationship, I think it's going to really encourage single men and single women that are listening. And I'm doing a series now where I'm bringing women on to come and talk about, their experience in relationships and how they're navigating faith and dating, and hopefully to encourage single men that listen from a woman's perspective. And so when Annie and I were talking about specifically having her come on, she was like, oh, let's is it cool if Hunter comes? I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And then I think you meant more like, hey, is it cool if he comes and like watches?
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, let's have him on. Like, it'd be great.
And I was like, let's go. This is our first. We told you this, but this is like our first podcast thing together. So this is really special for us. And so thank you for having us on.
Yeah, you're welcome. And your first podcast ever, Hunter, right?
My first one. Yep. So
Let's go.
happy to be here so, with these seasoned veterans. So.
Seasoned veterans.
Yep.
It's going to be great. So I'm excited for it. I want to give a little intro, like background on both of y'all, so people that don't know either of you can get to learn a little bit about you, and then we're going to jump into the questions. We've got some hard-hitting questions to go through for all the single men and women that are wanting to learn how to navigate faith and dating. And I think it's cool too, like how you all are both currently dating, you know? So like, how are you evaluating, okay, what should we do? Should we keep dating? Should we get engaged? Should we break up? And I don't know of really many podcasts that have had someone that's like currently dating and like trying to follow Jesus come on and speak about it. So that's going to be awesome. So little intro. We'll start with Annie. Annie is 26 years old, is from Atlanta, Georgia, and she has her own very successful podcast. She has a podcast called Made to Shine. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, go check out Made to Shine. Annie actually gave me a lot of great encouragement when I was first starting the Single Man podcast. And I think I texted Hunter, and Hunter's like, oh, you should talk to my girlfriend. Like, she's got her own podcast. I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like, oh, Annie, this is a big podcast that Annie has, and like she stewards it really well. And so yeah, just want to honor you in that. And I've been encouraged listening to your podcast and learned a lot from what you do too. So
well, thank you. And before you intro Hunter, I just want to say I remember that conversation, and I truly remember just what an amazing idea and vision you had behind this. And it is, you mentioned this before we hopped on, but it is so cool to be here now with you.
Yeah.
And like hearing about the fruit of what's happened with your obedience to the seed God gave you, because that's hard to do. It's one thing to have a dream, it's another thing to be obedient to it. So I want to honor you and what you've done and your obedience, and the fact that we're here right now having this conversation is so cool. So
yeah.
Thank you for honoring me in that way, but also want to honor you right back because it's really cool what you've done.
Yeah. Thanks, Annie. I appreciate it. And Hunter, he is 25 and he is from Chicago, Illinois, has been in Atlanta since 2022.
21. Yep.
2021. Mm-hmm. Okay. And both of y'all have been believers or following Jesus most of your life. And then you really started taking your faith more seriously. You said, Annie, in college.
Yeah.
So that was how long ago?
So I graduated college 2020. So I would say I really started following Jesus more seriously 2018.
Okay.
About 2 years prior.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like 6 years.
About 6 years. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And Hunter, you said that you started really following Jesus when you moved here to Atlanta?
Yeah, pretty much. Got plugged in and really started taking my faith seriously. 2021, 2022. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. And we both have, I guess like the three of us kind of all got connected through Buckhead Young Adults here in Atlanta. And I used to go to Buckhead Church before I moved to the church I go to now in Atlanta called Passion City Church. And love Buckhead Church and love seeing what's happened with the young adult ministry there. And Hamilton, who was on episode 6.
I was about to say, shout out to Hamilton. Yeah,
shout out Hamilton. And he's done a great job leading that ministry. And so y'all both serve with that. And that's kind of how we got connected.
I think we first connected Carlton at Friday morning though too. I don't know if you remember that. Way back when.
yeah. I guess that was that would have been like two and a half years ago.
Yeah, 2.5 years. That was right when I started showing up too. I think you were there. So
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That.
Were you in Hamilton's group too?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Still am.
Oh, you're still in it. Oh, good.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So cool.
Yeah. So we'd love to have y'all touch on how you both like approach dating, I guess, before meeting each other. Like what was that like? And I guess we'll start there.
Ooh, what a question. I'll kick us off. I was in a good amount of serious relationships in my life. For about a decade, I would say from when I was in high school, like freshman year of high school, to about, when I just had gotten out of college, I was always in a relationship. So it was basically 3 like serious relationships that each lasted a long time. And so I would say like my approach to dating prior, I was very much someone that didn't really ask necessarily how I felt about them or how kind of like what I thought about them. I just so looked at like, did they like me? And it was really coming from this place of, you know, wanting to be growing up. Part of, I feel like, my worth and my value and the way I associated the messaging around like a woman being in a relationship was having a boyfriend meant you were doing something right. And it kind of gave you validation. It gave you credibility. It meant you were pretty enough. It meant you were good enough. It meant you were valuable and worthy. And the boyfriend gave you that affirmation. And so for me, growing up, like dating, I felt like I always needed to have a boyfriend to give me that. And so my approach to dating wasn't necessarily so much, okay, do I actually like the person that I'm dating? Am I thinking about who they are as a person, or do I just love how they love me? And so because of that, I think that kind of led me to go down a lot of paths. And I think looking back, like God so protected me. I'm so grateful. And I always say this, every single relationship I was in, they were great guys. They were not bad guys. They were great guys. I think though what ended up happening was we each became each other's God. And like we wanted to, and we did, we idolized each other in the relationship more than anything else in our life, especially more than God.
Yeah.
And God was an ingredient to our relationship, but was not the cornerstone. And so I think that prior to, and I would not say like prior to me dating Hunter, but prior to me taking time before I found Hunter, I thought that if God was just even a conversation you had every now and then, you were doing something right.
Oh, yeah.
Versus like, this is the Holy Spirit is the person in this relationship with us. So I would say that was kind of my approach to dating, was that God was an ingredient, not the cornerstone.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
toss it to you.
Yeah, quite a bit different experience for me as well. Annie was in a lot of relationships up until this point, but I really hadn't done any dating.
Okay.
This was like my first real relationship, or is still my first real relationship since like middle school. You know?
Wow.
And so I think, and looking back on it too, like it's always been God's grace of like, I think protecting me, and that my heart just wasn't ready for that. I think back then, like always what I was looking for in someone was, what can I get out of this relationship instead of like, truly what can I give to this? And so, yeah, I think God really protected me in that way. And I think that's pretty much how I, was before.
Yeah. That's amazing. Okay. And y'all met here in Atlanta. What was that kind of like? And I'm curious, did you feel like you were content being single? I feel like that's a big thing that people say in the Christian sphere. And then what was that kind of like before you met each other?
You want me to take it? Let's go.
You talk about your book first.
I know, because I wrote a whole book on this.
Yeah.
I do. I so believe that people, and I say this not from a judgmental standpoint. I say this from a this is how I thought standpoint. I thought being single was like the consolation prize in life. Especially, I kind of got out of my last serious relationship at a time where it seemed like all my friends got into essentially who would be their husband in that relationship. Yeah. That was really hard, especially when my good friends started getting engaged and married and I was still single. And it wasn't from a lack of wanting. Like, I'll be the first to say that. There were seasons where I was like, yeah, I'm single. Like, I'm working on my relationship with the Lord. Like, let's go. And then there were times I was like, honestly, God, yoo-hoo. Like, I really want a boyfriend. Yeah. And I feel like my prayers are getting lost in the mail. And that's really hard when you see other people's prayer requests get answered and your prayers are identical to them. And you're like, it feels like a punishment. And looking back, what's so cool, and I'm still experiencing the fruit of this with Hunter, there really was such protection in that time. It was about 2 years of time that I was single, which might not sound like very long, but for me, like I'd never done that before in my life. And so like to go 2 years and like there was no dating, there was no relationship, there was no boyfriend. Did
you intentionally take time, or was it just it ended up being 2 years that you were
mixture of, okay, Annie, we are taking time, and then a mixture of God's protection. Like I remember going on dates on the dating apps, all that, and being on dates, being interested, and they weren't. And like that was hard. So it was honestly a mixture. It was a mixture of times where I was like, yeah, we're not dating, we are taking this time, we're surrendering it to the Lord. And then there's
Yeah.
times where I was like, okay, yeah, but I'm gonna go on the stage just to see. And God was like, no. And so all that to say, I think, yes, you can find contentment, but that word contentment, ultimately, it's supposed to be in the Lord. And whatever that means in that season, I think sometimes we take contentment. It's like, okay, I'm finally content with my singleness. Well, your singleness might change. So we're not called to be content in singleness. We're called to be content in the Lord. And if your season is singleness, well, your contentment with the Lord will be there too. If you're a season is a relationship with an awesome guy, the contentment's going to be there too, because the Lord's with you in that season as well. And so I think, like in Matthew, it's like, seek first the kingdom, all else will follow. It took a lot of forced obedience for me from God, like God forcing me to lay down angry passions. Like, I make you lay down, right? Like, he had to make me. But looking back, it was so necessary, because now I feel like when someone did come along that took me, like, it was not a good time, and we can get into that. But for me and what was going on with my life, it was not a good time to really start a relationship. There was something about, like, I can't let this one go. But I wasn't able to discern that had I not had that period of things not working out, and in that time with God.
Yeah. Wow. How about you, Hunter?
Yeah. I was definitely looking for it. But I think what was cool was, like, just the community that I built here in Atlanta was so special to me. And it's always so important to have, like, a community of Christ followers that speak life into you. We talk about this a lot too, but, like, who speaks life or over you, and who you allow to speak life over you, is so important.
Yeah.
Because there's always people that can bring you down, or there's the people that lift you up and point you back to the Father. And so I had just fallen in love with the community Friday morning that I mentioned earlier, and like getting plugged in at Buckhead Church too. Like, I just really found a great community that I loved and kept pointing me back to Christ. And like, I just remember, like, when I first moved down here to Atlanta, because I came from Wisconsin and Chicago and all that, and I was like, Atlanta seems cool. Like, who knows if I'll be here forever.
Yeah. Why'd you move here? Was it, like, job related?
Just
or?
for a job.
Okay.
Yeah. And then as soon as I started getting this community, though, I was like, I don't want to leave. Like, not because of my job, not because of money, like, because of the people. And it's just so special that to have that community speak life over you. And I just felt this connection with the Lord from that community, and that's what led me to stay.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like, going back to what I was looking for, like, honestly, I was just like, I feel really good with this community here, and I feel comfortable that God's going to lead this wherever it goes. Whether it's a dating relationship, whether it's with work, like, I just felt so rooted in Christ that I knew he had what was my best interest for him.
Yeah. Wow, I love that.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Because what you said I thought was so good. And I just want to expand on the idea of being single. Like, so many of us, especially well-meaning Christ followers, I think we take our time of singleness and say, like, okay, I hear you, God. I hear you. Like, this is my time to devote to you. But looking back on my life, that was really the time too. God wanted me to devote to being a good friend and being a good girlfriend. Like, not girlfriend, but girlfriend. I mean, I've been in relationships where I've had a boyfriend and I had no other friends than my sisters.
Yeah.
And I was miserable because my boyfriend was everything to me. They were my girlfriends. They were my friend group. And that was miserable. And I don't think that's how God calls us to live, especially in relationship. Like, the friendships I have in my life now, the God-fearing girls I have in my life now, that those friendships only happen because of the time I was single and I was like, I need community. They make me a better girlfriend to Hunter. And I knew God knew that I needed that progression. So I would encourage, single men or single women, like, yes, your singleness, spend time with the Lord, get to know him in you, of course, but also be a good friend, because that will help prepare you to be a better boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, whatever have you.
Yeah. That's so great.
One thing I wanted to add to that too is, like, as Annie kind of mentioned too, like, you see a lot of people that are dating or couples, and, like, they they were very involved, and then as soon as they get in a relationship, they're out.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Where'd Mark go? Like, where's Jim? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, seriously. But like, I think what's so testament of like a good relationship too is that you guys are seen. Like you put such a emphasis on in the beginning of this relationship too, of like our friends that we had separately seeing each other right away, like so that they could give me perspective of like, hey, what do you think of Annie? But not only just Annie herself, but also like her and I together.
Yeah,
and so that's just like so important, I think, of like, you know, no, this relationship isn't everything, but like and even like when you take the steps past dating and going into engaged and married too, like you still want to have those friends because you don't want to be locked that there's only one person. You know, they should be your main person, but like you still need that other perspective of like that, like for instance, like she has a sister, Lizzie, that like
Shout out.
Shout out Lizzie.
We were talking about this like last night, so
literally
this is
last
so
night.
fitting.
But like Lizzie's known Annie her entire life. I've only known Annie for 10, 11 months now.
Right.
And so like Lizzie can speak life over her in ways that I can't. And it goes the same way that with any friendships too. Like they've seen me in certain situations that Annie hasn't. And so I just think that's so important, that not to like make your dating relationship or even your marriage relationship your idol.
Yeah.
Even like in marriage, you are in a covenant, you are one with them, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you are, you know, only with them.
Right.
You need to have your own friends and community as well.
Yeah. So y'all both, it sounds like independently a little bit, we're kind of building community and friendships, and God was leading to do that for a period of time. And then at some point you see each other, or like friend groups intersect, or how did that kind of come about where y'all both met?
You want to tell this story? You can tell the front half. I'll take second.
All right. So what are the stakes? So honestly, Buckhead Young Adults. So,
Oh, no.
let me start there. So I had seen her at an event. I didn't know anything, but then is this what you're talking about too? Yeah. So I did see her pop up on Instagram, and I was curious. And so I saw she had some mutual followers, and then, reached out to one of them that I knew pretty well.
Okay.
And, she was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys would be a perfect fit." Like, I was a coworker. Like,
We worked together at our last corporate company.
Wow.
Our mutual friend.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay, great." Like, don't know what this is. I think she goes to my church, but I'm not really sure.
So you like DM'd your friend or something, or was like, or
About
texted
her.
like, "Hey, do you know Annie? Like, what,
Yeah.
do you think she'd be a good
Pretty
fit or
much.
something?"
No, I just asked, like, "You know her?"
Oh, you know her. Oh, cool.
She's like, "Oh my gosh, like you guys would be the best fit."
We
Yeah.
also grew up playing tennis together. So we've known each other for like
a while.
a while.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But and then I knew her pretty well. She was one of my friends' girlfriends too. So
Okay.
so I was just like, okay, cool. And then from there I had that seed planted, and so I went to, there was another Buckhead Young Adults event, a Friendsgiving event.
Oh,
and, she was walking out or whatever, and I kind of ran and wanted to say,
He ran.
introduce myself.
Oh yeah.
I'm kidding.
So
He briskly walked.
Was this
No,
last
no,
year,
I ran.
Friendsgiving, 2023?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, around Friendsgiving.
Cool.
So I ran after her, chased after her, and then no, but then I just brought up some conversations. I was like, hey, I know my friend, and you know her too, and we kind of briefly talked about that. Really didn't lead to anywhere. Like, I didn't ask for a number or anything, but like,
No, I was butthurt by that.
Oh,
I
yeah?
like so wanted him to ask
Wow, this, like,
for my
cute
number,
guy didn't
and he
even-
didn't. He just left. I was like, what?
well, I had things to do. I was working the event, so I had some stuff to do.
I think did you run into me when you came back into the auditorium? Because I remember
Oh.
running into you like
Yeah.
right at the exit
You were
of the
running a
auditorium.
lot.
I think you're right.
Yeah, wow.
I was all over the place.
You're just
That's crazy.
Johnny Walker.
But yeah, no, like that's when we had our first conversation. And then it was almost like we didn't meet, or I didn't say anything until like a week or two after we met at like coffee, and literally didn't say anything. Or I pretty much just said hello. How are you doing? Like quick.
Like you happen to see each other at a coffee shop or something? Or?
No,
Coffee, the
hour.
young adults coffee hour.
Oh, okay.
Before service.
At church, you saw each other.
At church,
again.
yeah.
Okay.
But like she was heading into the service, and I was leaving, so I was like, "Hey, good seeing you."
Oh,
and
nice.
then that was it. So then I went home for Thanksgiving break, and she followed me on Instagram.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So
And hot take, I think that because we can get into this, but there's such a conversation of like, does the girl pursue? Does
Right.
the guy pursue?
Right.
I am all for the guy pursuing. Like, as we'll get into, I'm very much like, I want him to make the plans. Like, because to me that shows leadership. But I think as girls, you gotta help him out a little bit. Like, you gotta let him know I'm interested. And
Yeah.
so I think like following him on Instagram, like that's such an easy way to do that. Or for the guy, like if you just like, that's such a soft touch. So I followed him on Instagram.
yeah, and then after that, I'm trying to think.
Did he follow back?
Oh, of course, of course. After that, let's see. I think did I DM you after that?
Yeah, he DM'd me. I was on the way. I had an ear infection. I remember I was like going to the ER and I get this DM from Hunter. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Oh my gosh, my ear. But yeah, he DM'd me asking for coffee.
Yeah. So going to coffee, simple,
Yeah.
and safe too, I would say.
Coffee, great. I think for any guy listening, I'm telling this to you and your wallets. Take the girl to coffee. And for girls, like we actually see differently on one of my principles in life. I believe in always letting a guy have a first date. If a guy asks me respectfully on a first date and my safety's not in question, I will always say yes. We see differently on that. But for me, I will say if the guy like asks me on a date and plans this elaborate thing, I will say no. I'll say, let's go to coffee. Because I think coffee is so simple. It doesn't break the bank for the guy if they want to be the one to pay. And it's casual. You know what I mean? It's like
it's like easy to leave. If it's not
easy.
going well.
Yeah, it's safe. It's easy. And it's a good way to get to know someone without like a lot of
Expectations. There's no
There's
expectations.
no expectations.
Either.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Great way to put it.
But then we went to coffee.
Yeah.
Goldberg's. And let's see, this was like before work one day.
Oh, wow. Okay. Early morning.
Yeah. We're both morning people, which it works out well.
Yes,
So,
we are.
So that was good. And then we, from there, had a really good conversation. I could go into like everything that I saw within her, but after that kind of went and you want to talk about
Can
that?
I please?
So I walked her back to her car after.
Well, first let me set the stage
Okay,
with this
fine.
because I wanna hype you up for a second before we say what happened. So I think what struck me about Hunter was our conversation. I really at the time, I remember my prayer. I was like, Lord, I don't know if you want me to get married, but I do know whoever you have for me, I want them to love you more than they would ever love me. And what struck me about Hunter from the beginning was from the very get-go, our conversations were so encompassed around God, and not just what you know about him, but how you know him. With him, I was like, man, this guy knows God. And I want to be with someone like that because, again, I want to be partnered with somebody like that. And so I think from the very get-go, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, we'll talk about small talk. Oh, no, I'm not very good at small talk. I like getting to this hard stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that what was cool was this is another thing I'll say. My tendency, and this is a great, I think, lesson for guys, is I'd been on a lot of dates prior where you're a podcast host. I'm a podcast host.
Yeah.
I am very good at dictating the conversation. I know how to do it. I know how to ask the questions. And I've gotten so frustrated in the past because I've left 3-hour-long dates where I know their entire family lineage, but they don't know one thing about me. And I don't know if it was nerves, but boys, ask the girls' questions.
Right.
And like with Hunter, I was so struck because I remember he literally cut me off. I was like about to go down my rabbit hole of the next round of questions I had for him. And he was like, no, it's your turn. Like,
I have a question.
I have a question for you.
Wow.
And I was like, what is this? I'm not used to this, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. And I was kind of bad about talking about myself at first because I just wasn't used to it. No one had done that for me in so long. That wasn't like my family or my deep friends. And so I was really struck by that. And then, so he walks me to the car and I was like, oh my gosh, I really like this guy. And so anyways, we hug and then we drive back and I drive back to my apartment and I send him a text like, thank you so much for coffee, all the stuff. I put some smiley faces and then he responds. Do you want to say what you respond?
No, let me just preface it.
It's over. No.
No, she sent this like, thanks for coffee, like whatever, it's so good seeing you. And I sent this sweet text. I was like, oh, it's the best start to my morning. I'm so grateful for like your passion and energy.
Wow.
And then
it was very nice. But then he was like, let's stay in touch.
Oh, okay.
No, Carlton, no, not okay. Not okay.
Oh, no.
I was like, what? So I literally was like, how do I decipher
Stay in
this?
touch?
Stay
What
in
does that
touch.
mean?
This is definitely not good feelings. There's no clarity here. I'm used to next steps. I'm used to like, let's do this again. This date, this time. I'm in corporate sales. I'm used to that. I'm like, the next call is this. There was no next steps. So I showed my brother. I was like, James, I need reinforcement. What does this mean? Decipher this for me from a man's perspective. And he literally told me, he's like, oh, man, you got friend zoned hard.
Dang.
I was like, well, shoot. I guess Hunter and I are going to be great friends.
Wow. Okay.
So that was that.
What were you thinking? Yeah, just like stay in touch, actually?
Well, no, I mean, actually, I was like, I really liked her, but like, I didn't know, like, I haven't been dating.
Right, like
so
what
it's
to
just
say.
Like, I don't know. I'm not very comfortable, like, setting things next right away. Like,
literally. That's one of the big things I get from the podcast. Like, guys just don't know how to date. Like, no one's really talking about it.
It's
so
hard.
how do you try to do it in a God honoring way? Like,
Yeah.
that's part of the vision for the podcast is to help
Which
people.
is so important.
Right. And I think part of it is honestly internally too. Like, I'm very committed based. So it's like, I don't want to commit to something until it's on the calendar. And so if I have the like actual bandwidth to just put something on the calendar and actually schedule it, I will be there. But like, I think kind of just saying like, like maybe sometime soon, like, no, that's not the right way to do it. And looking back, I don't know how like this worked out well, but like you should like, for those, definitely schedule next steps and specific next steps as well.
Well, and to give some, I think like to say what I was looking for, because I think that's helpful. You don't necessarily have to pull up calendars sitting down, but I think just saying like, I'd really love to see you again, maybe dinner this time. I think that's what I was looking for in regards to affirmation. Like, oh, he's interested to see me again. And he's already has not like the full plan. I'm going to take you to this place at this time, but he has an idea of what he'd like to do. That's, I think, what I would have been like, okay, wow. Like just affirmation. He's interested in me. Cause I left that text thinking he does not like me. Yeah. We're good friends.
I mean, we still talk about this though too. Like I don't like say things though until like I know the specifics for everything. So that's just like part of who I am. And so that's
and we're different. I'm very much like aim, shoot, fire. I don't aim or shoot. I just fire. I'm like, well, of course, correct along the way. So we're very.
I'm the aim and
he's
continue
like
aiming.
Aim. I'm like fire.
Love that. Okay. So then you followed up at some point, Hunter? Or
So it was less than like 4 days. Less than that.
Okay.
Like, I think I went on a retreat without my phone too.
Oh, cool.
So like that, I think that was on like a Friday, and then that
like
weekend,
a silent retreat or something.
Without my phone.
That's awesome.
And that's something that honestly, like, not related to relationships at all, but just like something in terms of the faith that I did start doing while I was single. Was like, my busyness takes up so much of me, and I kind of do idolize that. And so like God did start teaching me through that process of like Sabbath and like resting. And I think part of that too was like turning off my phone, and living undistracted. And so that's what I did start incorporating into my life while I was single, which was cool. Well,
side note there too. We found out at coffee, we actually both went on, because I went on a silent retreat too around the same time the year before.
Oh, wow.
We both did when we were at coffee, which I thought was really cool. But that's such a good point.
So you took the silent retreat and like felt, okay, I need to ask her out again afterward or something?
Not even that. Well, okay. So I did like feel more compelled to her. So I actually wasn't getting back until like later that Sunday. But like I wanted to go to church just so I could see her. So I did end up seeing her at church, and I was kind of exhausted actually, but she was walking out early. And I was like, oh man, I was like, I don't know if I like that she's leaving church early.
Yeah.
But I had a good reason.
But yeah, she had very good reason. She released her most recent, or her book at like that day.
Oh, okay.
And it was about being single.
I know. It was so funny. I literally, like, my last book was Single Not Incomplete. And it came out this Sunday after Hunter and I had just met. And so, yeah, which was so wild. So I had to leave church early because the launch was at like an hour after church. And so I needed to leave about 5 minutes to make sure I got back on time for everything. And so, but I remember I saw him because I left early. And he was like, hey, Annie. I was like, hey, Hunter. And then I kept walking. And
I'm about to go release my book on singleness.
I'm about to go release my book on singleness, which I guess I'm still single because this man told me to stay in touch. But just kidding. But then later that night, he texted me like, congratulations. And I asked a question back to him to like try to keep the conversation going.
Okay.
And
Nice.
throw him a bone.
There you go.
Okay, she kept the conversation going. But I did ask you on a date that night, right? So
Yes, he did. He did ask me on like a date to the botanical gardens that night.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's nice.
So was intentional. And I remember I texted James. I was like, I think you're wrong. And he was like, I don't know.
That's awesome. Wow. Okay. So now that was like 10 months ago or so when all that.
Yeah.
December.
Wow.
December.
Wow. So coming up on a year now, what's it been like? Okay. Actually dating and trying to think through, like, should we keep dating? Should we break up? Should we get engaged? Because those are like the only three options, right? When you're following
That's
Jesus.
so good.
Can I take this one?
Go for it, man.
Yeah. I think was really cool, like early on, what was really cool was we had our, like, honestly, we both were kind of had read like single dating engaged married by Ben Stewart.
Ben Stewart.
Before you started
10
dating?
out of 10. Oh yeah, I studied that book for like 2 years.
Yeah. And then but honestly what was cool about that too is like we had that base knowledge going into it. And I vividly remember too, I don't even remember what we were talking about, but Annie had something on her mind, and so we had a tough conversation. And what we want, we call them growth conversations.
Oh, cool.
But honestly, this was like probably a month or two into it, into us dating. And I don't remember the circumstance or whatever, but we went to lunch and at Superica, and she was like, okay, listen, like, I know what I'm looking for. I want to get married. Like, that's the goal.
Right.
And if you're just here to like see if this in, like, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like if this is what you want, like, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of playing games. Like, I'm in this like to look for my future husband. And so like honestly that was like, okay, I'm on board, like, because that's what we're looking for in dating, right? Like, it's not just a, hey, like, something play around. Like, no, like, if I'm gonna give my heart to you, like, it's not gonna be just this, we'll see how it goes. Like, there's some intentionality behind it. And so setting that intentionality and that expectation was like something that was really good for us at the get-go too, you know.
Yeah.
That's
great.
I think there's an important clarification too, because one, I of course had studied like Ben Stewart's book, and I knew like, okay, I'm not the kind of girl that just dates to date. Like, I've just never been like that. I'm very much like, I'm in or I'm out. Like, I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, I'm all in or I'm all out. Like, that's just how I am.
Right.
But I think what's important to clarify is, yes, you date with intention. I think sometimes people take that to the extreme, which leads to this first date has to be perfect. I have to know after this first date if they're my husband or if they're my wife.
Yeah.
If I don't, then it's like, okay, well, hold on. And Ben Stewart also says, like, there's no expectations in dating. And that is so true. Like, my first date with Hunter, oh my God, like, I didn't know if he was going to be my husband or not. Like, it's just like, you don't know. And that's okay. I think those aren't the questions you ask. It's, does he have the potential to be that? And is that worth continuing to explore? Now, there is a maturity in dating. You do get to a stage where I think it's like feelings get deeper. And I kind of was like, okay, where am I at? I really I love this guy, and I love so much about him. I see so much in him that I would want as a partner. I could really get hurt if I continued to proceed and he is playing games, and not in a facetious way, but in a way that's just not what he's looking for right now. So my perspective at that Super Rica lunch, I still remember it, was just like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm looking for. If that's not where you're at, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with a 25-year-old guy saying, I'm not looking for my wife right now. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
What is wrong with that is me continuing to date him and projecting my expectation onto him, knowing that's not what he wants. And then I get frustrated for something that I already knew was not his desire. And I think that's where a lot of us are.
Yeah.
And two, I think once you establish that kind of goes into like physical boundaries. Like, there's a reason that you honor physical boundaries in dating, because it kind of forces you. It's hard, and it forces you to have those conversations early on, because it's like, okay, I mean, this is it or it's not. Of course, not the first date, not the second date, maybe not the fourth, but like a couple months in, it's like, okay, are we doing this? Or are we not? And also not missing the moment. I always say to him, like, yes, I so see a future with him, and I'm so excited for that, but we will never get this dating season again, and like, there's something to be said about the beauty in, I have my own place. He has his place. He has his space. I have mine. Like, there is freedom in that. Is it hard at times? Sure. But like, there's so much fruit here. And I think sometimes we get so far ahead on where we're not, we just forget on the beauty of where we're at.
Yeah. I love that. So good. You mentioned physical boundaries, Annie. Yeah. So how did y'all talk about that? And what have you put in place that you're willing to share with the single listeners that would help them?
I'm gonna have a book. I mean, I think it's an establishment from the beginning. So like, and this was something that in my last relationship I learned, because I kind of started following Jesus, and like, okay, I need to be more, because I don't have a perfect past.
Yeah.
And like with my first, like my high school relationship and my first college relationship, like absolutely physical boundaries were crossed.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is, looking back, it was like, I didn't think it was a bad thing, because it's like, I love them, they love me. Like, what is the problem? And it's so cool to think that like how God changes your heart, your desires are different. And I'm realizing now, physical boundaries are not put in place because God hates us, because he wants us missing out on this awesome party. It's not because he's withholding from us. It's because he has something so spectacular for us. But again, sex, physical boundaries, the power of them. Like I always say, like, physical intimacy, it's like a fire. Ben Stewart says this, a fire can be super destructive if it doesn't have parameters. And if it has parameters, it can be life-giving. It can cook food. It can boil water. And that's how I think from the very beginning, like, we had upfront conversations about physical boundaries. Just like, hey, just so you know, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Like, this is my boundary. And yes, we can talk about like, that's hard.
Yeah.
And that's a constant conversation. But at the same time, like, the fruit that you see from that is, it is so much greater. It really is. So I don't know. What you'd add to that?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think, like, as you mentioned, like, being upfront with it too. And honestly, like we're not perfect too. So like obviously you can't go through like every single scenario and be like, okay, if like this, that, we're not
Right,
doing.
right.
But like I think what's cool is like the more time you spend with someone, you do get in those places, and then but being able to talk about it is the most important thing. And that like honesty of like, hey, I felt like we went too far, or like being able to bring that up is like that brings a lot of anxiety to people. But like truthfully, I think the heart of it is having those conversations, and that's when you know like you can have something special. Is like you can bring those up, and because we're not perfect, we're gonna mess up, and but like truly understanding what's the intent behind why we set physical boundaries in place in the first place, as well as you know, continuing to evolve of like repentance of like, hey, I think we went too far today.
Yeah.
And like just continuing to have those conversations. And the moment that you don't feel safe to have those conversations is when, you know, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And that's the Holy Spirit like working, you know, to want you to repent, I guess, right? So has it been something that looking back, okay, maybe you should have set like a harder boundary up front, or what was some of that conversation like around, okay, I think we went too far. Why did some of those conversations come up?
I think you have to look at, I call them triggers. I hate that word triggers because I think triggers has become like a weird word in our culture. But
Yeah.
I think triggers in a good sense, we all have triggers. You know, it's like they're things like triggers that lead you to want to be more physically intimate. For each couple, it looks different. But I think you have to look at where are our weak spots. You know what I mean? And is it a matter of, okay, maybe we don't need to be in, like I live by myself. We don't need to be in my apartment alone at times. Or I know for us, we've talked about before, like I think what's so great about the physical boundaries we've put in place, it has quite literally forced us to learn how to communicate emotionally because we don't have a distraction.
Yeah.
Like which is typically this, if I'm upset and emotional and I'm like, we don't have like, oh, we'll just like, I don't know, kiss it out. Like we don't have, it's like, no, we're talking about this because we don't have another lever to pull to
Kiss
feel
and make up kind of thing.
We don't
Yeah.
have like, the only way to feel intimate after this is that we've literally emotionally talked about this. And what's cool is even like today, like we had a conversation last night, a growth conversation. And today I was a little off, but like Hunter recognized it and could call it out. And I think what I've just seen over 10 months, again, in a way that I've never really dated like this before, is that the emotional intimacy, like there's a deeper sensitivity. I can feel when something's wrong. Like I can feel when something's off with Hunter. He can feel when something's off with me. And that's something that I think it's those little God winks of fruit that goes back to when you distract yourself with a physical, you know, gateway out of a hard conversation. It does show up in those sort of things. You kind of numb out the emotional connection to a degree. All that to say, going back to my point about triggers, you know, we've recognized like when we feel really emotionally connected, that's a trigger for us, you know, because you naturally want to be physically connected as well and intimate or whatever have you.
Yeah.
And so I think that, but then that goes back to, okay, well, what do we need to do in those situations? Maybe then we shouldn't have those conversations in this place or in that place. And I think you just have to know your weak spots. And again, that looks like being aware. That looks like being present. That looks like being alert. The Bible talks so much about like be alert, be sober in mind. There's nothing that makes you more drunk than physical intimacy. And so when you look at a relationship and you're evaluating a relationship and what you need to do and how you need to pivot, like, I mean, physical intimacy is so important. It's important to be attracted for sure, but like it is not the God of your relationship. God is the God of your relationship. And so I think there's a reason, it's like order of operations. There's a reason we're called to seek first Him and then be emotionally connected and then wait until marriage to do certain things.
You mentioned the boundaries, Annie. So are y'all waiting until marriage to have sex? And what has that conversation been like?
Yeah.
I think it was from the beginning too. Like right when we first started dating, we did set that from the beginning. It was like, just so you know, like I'm not having sex, and like I said, and I was like, yes, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
And so like that's putting it up front is the
Like
most
first
important.
date, second date, what?
It was
Right when I got back. So
Okay.
well, this was the first day I asked you to be my girlfriend.
Yeah, he asked me to
Oh,
be his
cool.
girlfriend.
Okay.
And then and I was just like, again, fire. I was like, great. So
Yeah.
Just so you know.
That's good. You gotta be like, you know,
yeah, and
clear
I
about
so
that.
believe. I think I would encourage people. It's like that's a boundary you commit to yourself and God before you get in a relationship. It's not. I think I'm gonna do this, but let's see how I feel. No, it's like you commit prior, and there's a reason for that because again, like you have that standard. It's pre-deciding. It's the art
Yeah.
of pre-decision.
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is, it's like a morning workout. You know, like I decided to do that workout the night before, not the morning of. Because guess what? I don't feel like doing it the morning of.
Yeah.
It's the same with sex before or not having sex before marriage. Like it's a pre-decision because it's hard. Like that's real. It's hard.
in the moment y'all are at your
Oh.
apartment, like no one's, I imagine it's
It's
like, okay,
so
we haven't set
hard.
this boundary, so why should we not do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, like to get back to like even the specifics thing that I was mentioning forward to, like the predecision of, you know, defining like what is not acceptable
Yeah.
has been like, and getting into the specifics is important too, because like when you're in the moment, it's like, okay, like it's so easy to fall down a slippery slope of like, we didn't really say that, you know, I can't do this, so I'll do that. But like,
Right.
if you just nip in the butt, like, no, like not, these are the things, like definitely not. And you can add to that list, and like, it's all like an ever growing list, but like,
Yeah.
I think just being specific with it, because as soon as like you get in that moment too, it's like, okay, like this, I think like your mind's so numb.
Like your body starts like, that's just how we're wired.
It's so it's so natural. It's more natural to do it than it is not to. But I'll also add to going back to, because like I never want to paint the picture that I'm perfect or we're perfect, because we are not.
Right.
And I've just noticed that like when we have when we've done things where I'm like, oh, I don't think that was good. The biggest play the enemy has, I think, is the thought process that, well, we messed up, we might as well just ruin it all. It's kind of like you're on a diet, you eat the one donut, and then you binge eat all the boxes of donuts because you're like, I ate that one.
Yeah.
No, like his mercies are new every single moment. And so like, okay, maybe you did go down, like maybe you had sex, like, I don't know. But like, I think the biggest lie the enemy plays is like, you've fallen too far. It's not worth it. You can't climb your way back up. But that isn't our God. Our God came down and his blood covers all. And so like, my encouragement to those, like even I said, like my past is not perfect, but here I am in this relationship, and I so believe I'm receiving the fruit of what it looks like to walk in a path that is trying to honor the Lord in this. And there is grace there. And so I want to encourage someone with that, because we're not perfect. Everything is like a conversation. And I think Hunter said it so beautifully. It's being with someone who you are committed. I'm not going to say it's easy to have the conversations, because I'm still like, it's not. Like, it's hard to be honest with your partner,
Yeah.
but you're committed to being honest with them about where you are and where you're not and how you need to course correct.
Yeah. So good. Thank y'all for being vulnerable and sharing. I think it's just going to encourage people too that, you know, no one's perfect. Only Jesus was perfect.
No one's
right?
perfect.
And the only people that I feel like are talked about in dating and relationships and just advice in general is like everyone's having sex. So like if people can be like, okay, here's a real couple that's like doing it and like trying to honor God in their relationships with physical boundaries. Okay, maybe it's possible for me to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's powerful. You both currently being in a relationship and going through it right now and dealing with it and being vulnerable to speak about it.
Yeah, one thing I'll add too is like, it's going back to the intention behind it too. Like I think what's cool about it is like, it wasn't coming from a place of like, you know, God says to do this, so we're gonna do it. That's like we've had conversation about that too, of like just rule following, kind of like the Pharisees.
Yeah,
where they set, you know, all of these rules to put in place. Like that's not what God wants. Like truly seeing like why does God want this for us? And it's to have like this emotional connection that we can develop to right here and now before we eventually can get to that place where it's acceptable. But like truly seeing like why God wants this for us and the beauty behind it as well is so important.
So now being in a relationship for 10 months, if you could go back, okay, last November before Friendsgiving, or you speak to yourself while you were still single, about to publish your book, Annie, like what would you go back and tell yourselves then?
I would say, and this might sound obvious, but truly, and this is something I'm still honestly working through, is this false belief that just because it hasn't happened yet, it's never going to. I think that's something I really struggled with. And even now, like there's times like I believe the best boyfriend in the world, and he's everything I could have possibly prayed for. But there's times I'm just like,
let's go.
It's like I do. I love him so much.
Right back at you.
But I think that there's times it's really hard for me to accept that because I got so used to being alone, and I got so good at operating by myself. So even now, it is a constant, and I say that intentionally. Like it does not come naturally for me. I am I feel like outspoken, and I do say how I feel when it's stuff I'm comfortable with talking about, but when it's things that I'm not proud of, like if I'm jealous, if I'm envious, if I'm struggling with insecurity, that kind of stuff is really hard for me to talk to Hunter about. But and it stems from this belief of like sometimes I feel like this isn't real, or I'm not good enough for this, or I'm gonna lose this, because obviously I'm not married, so my track record for a successful relationship is 0 for 3, you know. And I say that laughingly, but like that was all God's protection. But I do mean that and say like I think that I'd go back and say just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to. And guess what? When it does happen, all these insecurities, they're still going to be there. So you're going to have to work through them at some point. Because when you're single, you're so focused on getting the guy or the girl. But when you have the guy or the girl, you're focused on how do I not lose them, and it's the same insecurity underneath. So you're eventually going to have to deal with that. And talk to someone about it. You're going to have to talk about it with your person. And that's hard. That's not easy. So that's what I would say. Just hold on, babe.
I think for me, going back to like what I would tell myself would be that like hard conversations are natural, but they, also grow you so much, and that's why we call them growth conversations, is because like I think I had this belief too that like any hard conversation that we're gonna have is gonna like, oh, I guess we're not compatible anymore, this isn't gonna work out, you know. But like if you really look back at it, like each hard conversation that you have with someone is an opportunity for you to know them deeper, and for them and for you to reflect on like yourself even deeper too, like what, and continually ask yourself like, why am I feeling this way? And so I think like going back into is like to lean into the hard conversations and to really you know, view that as an opportunity to grow. Because I think, and you know, going back to like whether I leave or stay in this relationship, like it's really the spirit kind of like pulling you. Do you want to continue having these conversations and like leaning into the hard, or is it like better for you that you don't want to be a part of those conversations? So I think like for me, it would be like those hard conversations are room for growth, and they're so important too.
I think that's something for me, even like I enjoy when someone will have a hard conversation with me, even though it's hard, you know, in the moment, or okay, it can be, this is like convicting me, or, you know, why is this person like coming at me right now? But if they're doing it from a place of love, then it actually shows that they care about you a lot, because it's easier just to not have the conversation and just ignore it, or just, okay, I'm gonna leave, like I'm not gonna have this conversation with you. And so it just shows that y'all really care about each other to be able to have those type of conversations, I think.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the butt too, with like speaking in a way of love. Like when we have those conversations too, it's not like you pointing the finger and saying, you did this, you made me feel like you made me feel this, you're trying to do this. Like truly, I think what we've done well in our growth conversations too, and you know, we're not perfect, but like when you're in a relationship or eventually when you're in marriage, you're a team. And so like whatever conversation or whatever situation you're going through it as a team. So if you have that kind of mindset going into the conversation of like, hey, and it's always good, you know, for those listening too, to say like, when you did, not to put like assumptions of like, you did this to make me feel. It's like you did, or I felt this way when you did this. And that's kind of like, because that gives the opportunity of like, oh, that's not what I meant at all. Like this was my intention for why I said that. And so it truly like allows you to be like, I received it this way. I know that might not have been your intention. Yeah. I just wanted you to like give that opportunity to speak on that behalf. And so truly like that team framework and allowing, and not like being accusatory is so important. In those difficult conversations. That's I'd say
so good. I think not having the like maybe band-aid of sex too, you know, makes it easier to have those type of conversations as well. And so something that I think I feel like God's been working in my life as a single man at 29, like having conversations with friends, even like, okay, what does it look like when I said this? Like they took it this way, and just having harder conversations with friendships and family members, so that it's potentially preparing me, or would be preparing listeners for when they are in a relationship one day.
That's so good. The other thing too, I think that's so practical that, again, I think we've learned because we haven't had this distraction of like physical whatever to go off the cliff of, for lack of a better statement. But I think that yes, it's like, when you did this, I felt this way. Like, talk me through your intent behind that. Like, just talk me through that. But also, solution wise, I know we talked about this before, because I used to talk to him like, I felt this way. I need you to do this. Or it was like, and he opened up. He was like, when you say that, I feel like it's all on me to like fix this. And I realized that's a really good point. And so now I think we're both intentional about like trying to say, okay, so I'm taking responsibility in this, like, you know, figuring out this on me, or being intentional about this for me. I would appreciate if you would just be sensitive that this is something that triggers me, or if you would just like be sensitive that this is something I'm going through. And I think just even, it's like the solution to whatever it is, there's two responsibilities here because it's a team. So even if it's like I was hurt because he did something, or he was hurt because I did something, there's still responsibility on both ends to make the solution actually be walked out.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, instead of just like, all right, you did this to me, like you fix this.
Yep.
And it's like all on that person to do.
Because there's all, because even like you think about, well, why did that hurt me? There's obviously a wound in me that's not healed. So there's something in me that I need to heal, which is my responsibility.
Yeah. Right.
And he can be sensitive towards that with what he says, etc. But like that's on me.
Yeah. And to communicate that.
Exactly.
Is your responsibility to
communicate that.
Yeah. Wow. I want to start wrapping things up. Such a great conversation.
Unfortunately,
but want to give y'all a chance before we do the last question, which I ask everybody. But before that, what's been y'all's favorite date that you've each had been on? Want to end on like a fun, you know, high date?
I so know mine. So we were in Nashville visiting one of my very best friends not too long ago, and we were driving home, and he has a Tesla, so we had to stop and charge. And we were starving, and it was in like I think it was a Piggly Wiggly. Was it a Piggly Wiggly?
It was in this town, like small town, middle of nowhere.
Town, just nowhere.
They're just putting superchargers everywhere.
Yes, but it was awesome. So we were like, okay, I guess we'll go walk around. But then there was this Piggly Wiggly, and so we literally had like a Tesla picnic. We got various sandwich meats and cheeses and made sandwiches, and it was just so. I just feel like it was so us. Like we're not, I mean, yes, we like nice dinners at times, but like we're just, I don't know. I love the just simple, like in the Tesla, in Troy, I named the Tesla, in Troy, Piggly Wiggly dinners. That was just my favorite. That was my favorite date.
Yeah. And for me, I think like along those similar lines, I think around Easter time, we went on a picnic. Once again, a picnic.
Oh, okay.
But we went to Piedmont Park. Yeah. And it was a beautiful day. Like, had a bunch of food there, but I think like what really was my favorite part of it was like we just had such great conversations about like our future together, but also like just things that we hadn't talked about before. And so I think really that connection for me was just one of the best parts about that date for me.
Love it. Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to give y'all a chance to share that and maybe give some people ideas on what some good date ideas are. So nothing elaborate. It sounds like, just being in the moment and here's what we're doing, making the most of it.
It doesn't have to be crazy or fancy. And granted, everybody's different. I will go to my grave saying the best possible first date you could go on is a coffee date or a walking date if they're walkers and like to get steps in like me, because I'm always like,
a walk.
Coffee and a walk. Oh, let's go. Chastain. Go to Chastain. Whoa. There you go. This is gold content.
Remember I saw you on I guess it was a walking day a couple weeks ago on the Beltline. Yeah.
Yes, we go on so many walking dates.
Yeah, that's so true. But I think also like we're very compatible in just like the similar interests, and so I think like for those looking to like find date ideas, it's like what do you guys have in common that you guys can share? But also I think like one of the things that we have in common too is just like quality time. Like Annie said, like in the car, like it doesn't have to be a special setting for us. Like I think just quality time together is something that we value very deeply. So I think like just being intentional with that's one other thing I'll mention with the quality time too is like we're very like undistracted. Like we're never not on our phones that frequently, and so we give each other our like undeserved attention, which is makes me feel special too. So.
Oh, okay.
We actually talked about that the other day when there was a time we spent the whole day together and we were like, okay, maybe we should be allowed to be on our phones for like an hour because there's so many texts I haven't responded to because we're really good about, we're not
It's not even like a rule that we set. We just like naturally do it.
Okay.
And so like, it's like, okay, maybe we do need to be on our phones because, I haven't responded to my mom in 6 months, 6 hours, it's like, make sure I'm still alive.
Yes. And the last thing too that someone mentioned to him the other day, we do this every night, and I didn't know this was something that was cool because my family's always done it, but I brought it into our relationship, and I kind of love it, which is a lot of our conversations we go through the whole day. I like all the details. I want to know the whole day. What was your day like? But I think what is cool is there's always 2 questions we always ask each other, which is what was your favorite part of the day, and where did you see God today?
Wow. And
that for me has been like, it's held me accountable to looking for God in my day because I know I'm going to have to tell Hunter later that night. And so even if we can't FaceTime that night or we're not at dinner that night, we'll text each other favorite part of the day and where we saw God that day. And that to me makes me feel like I'm a part of his day because we're both very busy. Like we independently have very different lives. And so sometimes you have to be intentional about making sure even if they're not a part of your day, they are a part of your day. And that's kind of how we've done that.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. That's a really great tip.
Yeah.
Hopefully everyone listening, when you start dating, or if you're dating now, you can incorporate
after
that.
The coffee date and after multiple dates.
And one other thing.
First date, you start implementing that.
I know you're trying to wrap this up, Carlton.
No,
but I think
good.
One other thing that has grown our relationship, I would say too, that we started doing probably a month or 2 in, but like honestly praying with each other. Like we didn't really do that at the beginning, like right before meals and stuff, but like we made it like an intentionality. We do these like corporate reviews every month. We do like highs, lows, improvements and praises for each other.
Okay.
For that month, which has been cool.
That was all Hunter's idea, which was a great idea.
Nice.
But no, like one of those things was like I want to continue like improve in our prayer life together, and so we've done like a really good job of like every time we see each other just praying with each other before I leave, or even when I get there, or during important times, like just that prayer life is so important too. So that's definitely something I'd recommend for those out there, especially in the faith community that are looking for ways to connect with your partner as well.
Okay, man, that's good. So that's a bit of like a hot take, I feel like, in a way, because I've
of hot takes.
I've heard it before, like people, that builds intimacy, like praying together. So, but y'all have found it beneficial.
Oh, It's so bad. And granted, going back to, we're not perfect. We were really bad at it at first. Like, we were like, okay, every time we leave, like he leaves or I leave, we'll pray for each other. And we kept forgetting. But then you give yourself grace. And it's just like, it counts if we remember the next time. And so we just kept doing it. And there really is nothing more intimate. Some people never in their life have people pray over them, but to have your partner pray over you and like pray strength for you and courage for you and to point you. I love Hunter once said the point of a relationship is literally, there's like this basketball gif, I don't watch basketball so I don't know, but of the guy like lifting the guy's head up when his head's down, and that's what I want to do for him, and that's what he wants to do for me, but lift it up to God. And so prayer is like your active way of doing that for one another. Yeah. And it's intentional, So it's been awesome.
So good.
It's been great.
Okay, last thing. We'll wrap up with this. So I ask every guest that comes on. So one thing that you want to leave single men that have specifically been listening to this episode, okay? Write this down, take this action item in their phone, heading into the weekend. What would that one thing you want specifically single men to take away?
I would say God's timing, not mine. And I think that's been so important for me because it's like when I really wanted a relationship, it's like I want to try to like, what can I do to do this? And it's like, if God wants this to be a part of your life, like it will, he'll bring it to fruition. And so truly like trusting that it'll be like he will bring that for you. Annie and I have talked about this too. Like if I had met her 6 months before, like I don't think we would have been, there were things that I had to work out in my own life that I don't think we would have been compatible. And so like truly if you just continue like going to God and finding that community that points you back to him, don't try to force it yourself. And so that's what I would leave single men with is like, don't try to force yourself into situations. Like truly trust that God will have that for you.
Yeah.
I love that. I would think mine's along that lines. I can't speak as a single man,
right.
But as a single woman that wanted a single man to want to date me and to love me, I would say that like at the end of the day, I think what most women struggle with is just this fear of not being good enough and this fear of not being safe. I remember very early on, I told Hunter, I want to feel precious to you and I want to feel safe. And I think that when I feel safe, and I feel so safe with him, that lets me be the boss person I am, because I do a lot of things, but I don't believe in the whole, like, I don't need no man like that. I don't believe in that. Like as women, we're designed to need men. And I think men have forgotten that. Like men are leaders. There's a reason that it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Like there's a reason that in the Song of Solomon's, like the church is equated to be like the wife and Solomon and Christ is the bridegroom. Like there's a reason Christ is the bridegroom. Like men are supposed to lead. You are leaders. There's a reason you feel irritation when you can't pursue the way you want to because you're supposed to pursue. Yeah. And so I would say like honor that, trust in that, and know that at the end of any day, like with the right person, that woman just wants to feel safe with you and feel like she's good enough and worthy. And I'll also leave with one more thing. The right person at the wrong time is still the wrong person. The wrong person at the right time is still the wrong person. The right person at the right time, that's all up to God. That's who God has for you.
Wow.
That's what I'd say.
Love it. Amazing. Annie, Hunter, thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming on.
Thank you, Carlton. This was a pleasure.
You're an amazing host. I had the best time. This is so fun. This is so fun.
So fun. Yeah, really just encouraging to me just seeing y'all's relationship. I guess I was there the first night that y'all met now looking back on it. So that's kind of crazy.
You were.
So cool.
But yeah, cool to just see how God's working in y'all's lives. And I just respect y'all both like individually so much too. And to know that God's brought y'all together and just to see you be vulnerable and like sharing kind of what's been going on. And I think it's going to really encourage single men and women that are listening. So just really appreciate you both being here and taking the time out of your day to come on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton. This was a blast.
It was. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah. Everybody that's listening, thank you all so much for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support. If you made it to this point in the episode, would love for you to leave a comment on the video with one thing that you're taking away, one piece of encouragement that Annie or Hunter shared. Would love to share that with each other. And I pray that this blessed you. If it did, would love for you to share it with a friend that you think would be encouraged by it. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Single Man Podcast. If someone you know would benefit from this week's episode, I'd love for you to text them the link and invite them to listen. You never know how a simple invitation could change someone's life. We'll be back next Friday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific with a new episode. Until then, check out the video version of the podcast on YouTube, and you can engage with us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.